We wanted to share some glimpses of the practice we have been developing to understand the elastic potential of the human body through working with the fascia and the connective tissue. Recent studies of watching kangaroos hop and leap led to the discovery of how they actually stretch the tendons and ligaments in the lower body and store kinetic potential that it's released, then allowing them to do such amazing jumps. And the scientists who came up with this study about 12, 15 years ago also realized that gazelles have the same mechanism. And in recent years, through different type of scanning of the human body, we've discovered we have a fairly similar mechanism that allows us also to store this kinetic potential in the body. Now, from a traditional joint muscle perspective, the skeletal muscles would shorten, which would then result in this potential passing through the tendons, resulting in movement. And although this is a model that it still works and we use, it's not the only way. If we then consider the mechanism that we can observe in traditional arts, the length of the tissue of the muscle doesn't change really much when you are coiling and producing this potential, and thus is the tendon and the ligament that is stretched to generate this potential that then it's used either to generate motion or also as a different guideline or perceptual model to organize the body in a non-traditional way, let's say. So if we think of different ways, almost like an isometric effort that wouldn't change the length of the muscles, but we're still stretching and lengthening the connective tissue, this potential can be then stored and released. So it's a release-based, like an elastic band mechanism, as opposed to the contraction to shorten and then move the joints, if that makes any sense. So we can think of traditional ways of moving the body that would require some of the key points that we shared recently that are actually revisiting many of the foundational practices from traditional arts when it comes to maintaining the alignment and the structure of the spine, the harmonies in the body, and many other of the elements that we work with during the events. Okay? So if I work with a partner here, we always have to make sure that we are structurally sound. We can think of a basic up and down motion through the legs, almost like a squat. Okay? So my partner will determine the range without compromising or changing the angle of the hips. So up and down, and then you can do it perhaps sideways also. So facing in either direction. And this will determine the range we're going to be working with. Now, if my partner begins with the arms up, an overhead position, and in the top position of this squat range, what I want to do is to stretch his tissue without compromising his structure. And as soon as he starts squatting down, there's an increase that we then release, and he learns how to take this sensation of the forces passing and traveling through the body to complete the action. Likewise, if he's in the bottom position, and I stretch the tissue also as he starts to stand up, I can release that potential, and then he works with this sensation to keep guiding the motion. Yeah? Now, likewise, if we think of a sideways motion, my partner can grab my arm, and he will stretch my tissue. I have to be structurally sound. If I start to then add to the stretch by moving my foot, he feels the increase, and he can let go, and then I take that sensation and let the movement happen. Now, this sensation that we're talking about is rather simple to replicate. If you think of the door frame party trick, the constant phenomenon, that we'll also explain in a moment. So if we think in this perspective, the sinking causes sinking, and then the rising can cause rising, but we can also work with the opposite, meaning my partner can stand in the top position of that squat, and I would be stretching the tissue. So when he starts to go down, this increases, and then as I release, he can take that potential, but the movement wouldn't stop on the way down. So we have this separation. He's still going down, but he has this upward potential. Or then at the bottom position, he would be in this overhead, and I could also stretch the tissue, and as he starts to come up, I can feel that, and he can ride that potential to continue and let the movement happen. We're after distinguishing this effortless quality that is completely different to what we experience when we have the contraction-based model, okay? And then from this, we have all different types of drills that we implement to give people this reference so they can understand how to work with this. And we want to differentiate the subtle difference of that so then we can generate more potential and use it in different scenarios. So if we have the reference to some of the fascia lines, like what is mentioned by Tom Myers in the anatomy trains, we can think of some of the main front and back lines and use it as a type of stretch. So if my partner is stretching me here and I don't have any awareness of the lines, he can simply just stretch me in this extension angle. What I want to do, when he starts stretching, release 1 second please, it's the minute he starts to doing that, I work with awareness to some of those lines. So I go into some sort of a general extension. From here, I want to counter that stretch by tilting my pelvis, which then add to that potential, and when he releases, my hands just come straight to the front. It's like basically this type of an action. So we want to get more and more reference of how to turn the body into an elastic band and distinguish what the role of the joints is, what the role of the muscles is, and then what's actually happening with the connective tissue. So if we think of the universal circles that you find in some of the Eastern martial arts, this type of a motion, that it's going one way and then the other, you want to continuously monitor what is happening with all of the joints and feel that potential. And this can be more circular or linear, but we have the reference of the partner pulling from the side, stretching the tissue. Now, if he pulls me and I shift my structure, that does not result in the loading of the elastic quality. I have to maintain, counter by moving, and then he feels that, this releases, and I would continue the motion with the other foot. If we talk about this hand though, it wouldn't be a throwing action, but we still want to identify how to load the rubber band, if you like. So it would be fairly similar to this type of a stretch that we were doing from a single arm, but it would be more in this staggered type of position where he's essentially just pulling, right? And I want to first find a way, in this case, again from the tilt, to increase that. And when he feels the extra, boom, releases and my arm would move forward. If we then think of what is happening in this position, right? Initially, I would have moved this foot, which would have resulted in moving the same side arm. From this position, he's already stretching me, and when I move this foot, this increases the stretch here, boom, and then he releases that way. So then I can take that reference of the stretch, find the connection, and let the movement happen also. We can then test with the help of a partner, creating some sort of a continuum ring. So if my partner is aware of this type of wedging quality to connect with the connective tissue, and I create this type of a circle, for example, this way, or this way, or this way, she can then connect to my arms and give me a bit of stretch. So in this case, she would be wedging forward to connect with my top arm, and then the bottom, she's actually pulling back a little bit. Now, I want to then connect also to her own structure, and through that stretch, I can start to move and move her in space. Of course, we're just collaborating and finding this gliding quality between the two of us, as opposed to, say, being in a tussle where I want to just pull with my arms, okay? So I can feel the difference in activation even if I want to pull and load the tissue some more. Now, granted, I can still use the skeleton and my muscles here, but I want to start working with that potential and load that and release, okay? We want to work first through the effortless distinction of letting the movement happen, and then we can start to work with a partner. Now, this is just to distinguish and understand the potential that we have, not necessarily to replace other models that we would use in athletic performance or even combat sports or anything, acrobatics also. So it's very, very important that we understand what we're trying to distinguish and develop here. So with the constant phenomenon or the door frame party trick, essentially you can work with the rack or the door. This one, it's a little bit big, but it'll still do. And what I want to do with this is press against the door continuously for about 30 to 60 seconds. I need to have this effort Yeah, so that's what results in this isometric type of loading. So I hold that for about 60 seconds. Once I complete the 60 seconds, I have to move away from the door, relax the arms, and just let the sensation guide my arms. So when I do that, my arms basically just float, continue going up. And that can rest for a little bit. The more I relax and let that, it's still floating, a little bit less wrench this time. Again, I release, I identify that same sensation, they start floating up to about here. If I continue now, I'll be contracting to follow up. So this type of sensation is very, very similar to what we've been mentioning in terms of stretching and then releasing. The effortless quality is what we're trying to distinguish, and then the sensation through the whole body as we're working. As mentioned, we could do this here, but we can also do it with the rack. And once I identify that, it adds another layer that I can use when interacting with a person. So if my partner is coming, and we think of any type of bridge frame that it's using in the martial arts, and she connects with me, and I'm just using my mass and muscle to force and do this, I can go under and kind of change and do that. But once I load the tissue, it's also helping me organize the whole body and maximize, like promote this whole body power, if we like. So I can load the structure again for about 60 seconds. Now I understand that sensation and I maintain that potential in the body, so when she comes, then I can pass on like an elastic. So basically, this helps me pass my mass onto her. Essentially, it's a more contained, refined way of doing a shifting passing of the mass with the partner. So when I step in, essentially I do this and then I move her. So at first I would have to move in space, have some momentum, connect, and then extend. But if I identify this potential, then the motion can be much smaller. Yeah? So it's not a fighting technique or anything. Essentially, we're working with the complexity of the human body and understanding how we can deal with these elastic forces with the help of a very complex type of weight, if you like, another human being. I hope that provides some clarity in terms of how to explore this elastic potential. If you want to go deeper into this, make sure you join any of the upcoming events that we're going to be having, and send us a message also online if you have any questions. Thank you for your time.